The office atrium felt like a freezer. Cold air blasted from vents overhead while I clutched my red spiral notebook against my chest. My hands shook as I stared at the glass wall where HR posted separation notices. Paper fluttered in the harsh breeze from the air conditioning. My name is Aileen Cooper, and I was fired this morning for refusing unpaid weekend work. If this happened to you, tell me where you're listening from, because what I'm about to share will blow your mind. The crowd around me whispered and pointed at the notices. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked scared, like they might be next. My termination letter was right there on the wall for everyone to see. I gripped my notebook tighter. Inside were pages of evidence that would destroy the man who fired me. He thought he was so smart, demanding free labor from his employees. He had no idea what was coming. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward the exit. Security watched me like a hawk, making sure I didn't cause trouble. But the real trouble was just beginning. I stopped at the glass doors and turned back one last time. Soon, everyone would know the truth about what really happened in this building. Friday evening, those awful fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. I was zipping up my bag, ready to go home after another long week, when he appeared at my desk like a storm cloud. "Come in this weekend and finish the backlog," Manager Burton said. His voice was flat and cold, like he was ordering coffee instead of stealing my free time. I looked up from my desk, confused. Will I be paid overtime for the weekend work? His jaw tightened and his eyes went dark. The question seemed to offend him deeply. He crossed his arms and stared down at me like I had asked something terrible. "Loyal employees don't ask for pay," he said slowly. Each word felt like a slap. "Be a good employee for once, Aileen." The words hit me like ice water. For once, I had never been late, never missed a deadline, never caused any problems. My work record was spotless. How dare he question my loyalty? Other people in the office pretended not to listen, but I could feel their eyes on us. Everyone was watching to see what I would do. My heart pounded as I realized this was a test. A test I was about to fail. The parking garage was dim and cold. My breath came out in little white puffs as I leaned against my car. The concrete walls seemed to close in around me, making everything feel smaller and darker. I replayed his words in my head. "Be a good employee for once." The phrase burned in my mind like acid. What had I ever done to deserve that kind of treatment? I thought about all the late nights I had stayed to finish projects. All the times I had covered for sick coworkers without complaining. All the extra effort I had put in without asking for anything in return. Being called disloyal stung worse than any insult. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I had given this company everything, and this was how they thanked me. The cold air bit at my cheeks as I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to be his free labor. I unlocked my car and sat in the driver's seat, staring at the concrete ceiling. Tomorrow would be Saturday, and I would not be in that office. I decided right then, I wasn't going to be exploited. Monday morning, the office kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. I rinsed my chipped white mug under the weak faucet, trying to wash away the weekend stress. The water was barely warm. Around me, coworkers moved like zombies. Their faces looked tired and defeated. Nobody made eye contact or small talk like usual. Something was wrong. I overheard whispers near the coffee machine. "Did you get the weekend invite?" one person asked. "Yeah, but I couldn't say no," another replied. "He said it would affect our reviews." My stomach twisted into knots. Weekend invites? What were they talking about? I hadn't gotten any invitation to work the weekend. I had stayed home like a normal person. More voices joined the conversation. I was there until Sunday night. My kids were so disappointed I missed their soccer game. At least we're showing commitment, right? The reality hit me like a truck. While I was at home enjoying my weekend, my coworkers had been forced to come in and work for free. Burton hadn't just asked me to work unpaid hours. He had demanded it from everyone. My hands shook as I filled my mug with coffee. I needed to check something. I walked back to my desk with heavy steps, dreading what I might find. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop with trembling fingers. The screen glowed blue as I clicked on my company calendar. My heart hammered against my ribs as the page loaded. There they were. New meetings scattered across my calendar like poison. Each one had the same strange title: Weekend Sprint, Delete After. The meetings were scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, times when normal people should be resting. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides with a spoon. These weren't requests. They were commands disguised as calendar invites. I scrolled through the details of each meeting. Mandatory attendance, business-critical work. Department restructure depends on completion. The language was designed to scare us into compliance. The worst part was the instruction to delete the meetings afterward. Burton wanted to erase the evidence of forced unpaid labor. He knew what he was doing was wrong, maybe even illegal. I took screenshots of everything. My phone camera clicked quietly as I captured each calendar entry. The timestamps, the wording, the delete instructions, all of it was evidence. At home that evening, my printer hummed as it spit out page after page. I organized everything in a folder labeled Weekend Work. I had a feeling I was going to need proof. Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed while I made tea. The kettle screamed on the stove as I checked the company group chat. My blood went cold as I read the latest message from Burton. Hope you all show your commitment this weekend like the dedicated team I know you are. The message was followed by a parade of forced emoji reactions. Thumbs up, heart eyes, clapping hands, all from coworkers who had no choice but to pretend they were happy about free labor. I scrolled through the responses. Absolutely, can't wait. Always happy to go the extra mile. Team first. Every message reeked of fake enthusiasm and hidden fear. Then my phone buzzed again, a private message from Lucy, one of my desk neighbors. She had sent me a photo that made my stomach drop. The picture showed our office on Sunday. Dozens of people hunched over computers, working under the harsh fluorescent lights. Their faces looked exhausted and defeated. Empty coffee cups and food containers covered every surface. Mandatory fun, Lucy had written under the photo, but I could see the pain in her digital sarcasm. I stared at the image for a long time. While I was enjoying my weekend freedom, my friends were trapped in corporate slavery. Burton was turning us against each other, making loyalty a competition instead of a choice. Sunday morning sunlight slanted through my bedroom curtains, painting golden rectangles on the wall. I should have felt peaceful, but my phone kept buzzing with messages that made my blood boil. I opened a new folder on my laptop and started saving Burton's texts. Each message was worse than the last, building a case against him without him even knowing it. Team players show up when needed. Don't disappoint the department. Your dedication will be noted in reviews. Each text was a thinly veiled threat wrapped in corporate speak. The final message made me highlight it in bright red. If you can't be counted on, don't bother coming Monday. My pulse thundered in my ears as I read those words over and over. It was threatening to fire anyone who didn't work for free. The audacity was breathtaking. I saved the message as evidence, then leaned back in my chair. Burton thought he held all the power, but he was wrong. Every threatening text, every manipulative message, every illegal demand was building a case against him. I printed out the conversation thread and added it to my growing file. The folder was getting thicker by the day. Soon, I would have everything I needed to bring him down. Monday morning, the elevator hummed as it carried me up to face whatever punishment Burton had planned. I wiped my sweaty palms on my skirt and tried to steady my breathing. The metal walls felt like they were closing in. The doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped into the office. Burton stood at my desk with his arms folded like a vulture waiting for something to die. His expression was cold and calculating. "We'll remember who showed up this weekend," he said without blinking. His voice carried across the quiet office, making sure everyone heard the threat. Around me, coworkers kept their heads down and pretended to work. Nobody wanted to be the next target of his anger. The whole floor felt tense and afraid. I walked to my desk, feeling like I was walking to my execution. My chair felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Everything seemed different, dangerous. Burton didn't move. He just stood there, watching me with those cold eyes, making sure I understood my place in his twisted hierarchy. My desk suddenly felt like borrowed space, like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The feeling made my skin crawl. I sat down and turned on my computer. but I could still feel him watching me. The message was clear: conform or be destroyed. The conference room smelled like stale pastries and broken dreams. Burton had called me in for a performance discussion, but I knew this was really an ambush. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like wasps in a jar. He slid a packet of papers across the polished table. Performance improvement plan, the cover read in bold black letters. My stomach dropped like a stone. This is effective immediately, he said with fake concern in his voice. We need to address some concerning patterns in your work ethic. I flipped through the pages, feeling sicker with each line. Failure to demonstrate team commitment, reluctance to exceed basic job requirements, questionable dedication to company values. Every accusation was about my refusal to work unpaid weekends. He was documenting a fake paper trail to justify firing me. The plan was dated Saturday. He had written it while my coworkers were slaving away in the office. Behind Burton's shoulder, I could see the wall clock. Its red second hand swept around the face, marking time. I discreetly pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the document with the clock visible in the background. The timestamp would prove he created this punishment on a weekend when I was supposed to be working for free. "Do you have any questions?" he asked with a smug smile. I had plenty of questions, but I kept them to myself. Back at my desk, printers chattered and phones rang, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. The performance improvement plan sat on my keyboard like a death sentence. My hands shook as I held my coffee mug. Burton appeared at my desk again, like a bad penny that keeps turning up. He leaned against my cubicle wall, making himself comfortable in my personal space. "So, Aileen," he said slowly, savoring each word. "I trust you understand what needs to change around here." I looked up at him with steady eyes. "I won't work unpaid weekends," I said softly but clearly. "That's wage theft, and it's illegal." His face twisted with anger. The mask of fake professionalism slipped, showing the bully underneath. He tapped his knuckles on my desk twice, a sharp rap that made me jump. "We'll see about that," he said through gritted teeth. Within minutes, a meeting invite appeared in my email. Final alignment discussion, Monday 9 a.m. The subject line was polite, but the threat was obvious. I forwarded the invite to my personal email account. Everything Burton did was evidence, whether he knew it or not. I sipped my coffee and tried to look calm, but inside I was already planning my next move. The final alignment was coming, but not the way Burton expected. Human resources smelled like lavender air freshener mixed with old carpet and broken dreams. The scent was supposed to be calming, but it made my stomach turn. I sat across from HR Director Barnes while Burton lurked in the corner like a shadow. "Failure to support critical business needs," Barnes read from a prepared script. Her voice was flat and emotionless, like she was reading grocery prices instead of destroying someone's life. I placed my employee badge and office keys on the polished table with a soft click. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. Burton wouldn't look at me directly. He stared at the wall behind my head like a coward. "Your final paycheck will be processed according to company policy," Barnes continued. "You'll receive the termination paperwork via email within the hour." I stood up slowly, my legs feeling weak and shaky. This was really happening. After years of loyal service, they were throwing me away like trash. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" Barnes asked, probably hoping I would beg for my job back. I looked directly at Burton for the first time since entering the room. "I have plenty to say," I told him quietly, "but I'll save it for the right audience." His face went pale, but he still wouldn't meet my eyes. Outside the office building, car horns blared and sirens wailed in the distance. City noise surrounded me like a chaotic symphony as I hugged my cardboard box against my chest. Inside were the remains of my corporate life. My chipped coffee mug, my red notebook, and a photo strip from last year's team lunch. My employee badge was gone, cut up and thrown in Barnes's trash can like it never mattered. 5 years of service, reduced to garbage. People walked past me on the sidewalk, rushing to their own jobs, their own problems. Nobody looked at the woman carrying a box of broken dreams. I was invisible, just another casualty of corporate greed. I made it to my car before the tears started. They came hot and fast, blurring my vision as I fumbled with the keys. The box sat on the passenger seat like an accusation. but anger was stronger than sadness. By the time I got home, my tears had dried and my jaw was set with determination. I set the box on my kitchen counter and opened my laptop. On the screen, I created a new folder and gave it a name that made me smile for the first time all day: Case File, Burton. The real work was just beginning. My laptop fan rattled in the quiet apartment as I opened my work calendar one last time. The weekend tasks still glowed on the screen like evidence under a blacklight. Each delete after meeting was a smoking gun Burton didn't know I had saved. I connected my external hard drive and began copying everything. Screenshots, calendar entries, email threads, all of it went onto the drive labeled Pay Proof in bold black letters. The files transferred slowly, giving me time to think. Burton thought he was so clever, erasing the digital trail of his illegal demands, but he forgot that smart employees make backups. My screen recording software captured everything as I scrolled through the calendar. The timestamps were clear, the delete instructions obvious. Any lawyer would see this as proof of wage theft. I ejected the hard drive and held it up to the light. This little device contained enough evidence to destroy Burton's career. He had handed me the weapons to fight back, wrapped in his own arrogance. On my desk, I kept a handwritten checklist: texts, photos, video. The next items on the list would be harder to get, but I was just getting started. Burton had taught me to be thorough. Time to use that lesson against him. The apartment was dark, except for the glow of my laptop screen. I opened my red notebook and began writing down everything I could remember from Monday's firing meeting. Each word came back to me like a perfectly preserved recording. "We'll remember who showed up this weekend." I wrote Burton's exact words in careful handwriting. The threat was clear, even if he thought he was being subtle. Barnes's script about business needs went down on paper too. The way Burton avoided eye contact, the prepared nature of my termination. Every detail mattered. My hand cramped from writing, but I kept going. Memory fades, but written records last forever. If this case went to court, I wanted to remember everything exactly as it happened. I underlined the most damaging quotes in red ink. Burton's threat about remembering who showed up, his demand for loyalty without pay, his admission that weekend work was mandatory. Each sentence was another nail in his coffin. He had been so confident, so sure he was untouchable. Corporate bullies always think they're too smart to get caught. My notebook filled with page after page of evidence. By dawn, I had documented every illegal thing Burton had done. The case was building itself. The coffee shop smelled like cinnamon and fresh hope. I sat across from my former coworker Penny, who kept glancing around like she expected Burton to appear at any moment. Her hands shook as she held her latte. "He threatened to tank my performance rating if I didn't come in Saturday," she whispered. "I have 3 kids, Aileen. I can't afford to lose this job." Another coworker, Leonard, nodded with wide, frightened eyes. "Same thing happened to me. He said weekend work was voluntary, but then made it clear our jobs depended on it." I pulled out my notebook and wrote down their exact words. These weren't just stories. They were witness statements. Burton had threatened multiple employees with retaliation for refusing unpaid work. "There's something else," Penny said, looking around again. "There's a Slack thread you need to see. He didn't think we could access the management channel, but someone figured out how to view it." My pulse quickened. A management Slack thread would contain Burton's unfiltered thoughts about his illegal scheme. If he had admitted to wage theft in writing, the case would be airtight. Leonard pulled out his phone and opened the company Slack. "Look at this," he said, showing me the screen. What I saw made my mouth go dry with shock. Midnight. My room was quiet except for the whir of my laptop fan as the Slack thread loaded. Penny had forwarded me screenshots that made my blood run cold. "If they expect pay for weekend work, they're not loyal enough for promotion," Burton had written to the other managers. The message was time-stamped during work hours, sent from his company account. I scrolled through more messages. "Keep the overtime budget locked down. Make them think it's about loyalty, not money. Anyone who refuses weekend duty gets documented for performance issues." The worst one came at the end. "Fire the troublemakers first. Make examples of them so the others fall in line." My hands trembled as I screenshot every message. Burton hadn't just stolen wages. he had conspired with other managers to cover it up. This was organized, intentional wage theft on a massive scale. I immediately forwarded everything to a labor attorney's inbox. The email went out at 12:47 a.m., and I included a subject line that got straight to the point. Smoking gun evidence of wage theft and retaliation. My laptop chimed with an auto-reply. We'll review your submission and respond within 24 hours. Burton thought he was so smart, but he had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. The public library smelled like old paper and lemon cleaning solution. I spread my documents across a quiet corner table and began mapping out my battle plan. Other patrons worked on their own projects, unaware that someone nearby was building a case that would shake the corporate world. I drew a flowchart of the company hierarchy. Burton reported to Regional Manager Clark, who answered to Corporate VP Torres. Above them sat the Labor Board, Ethics Hotline, and Unemployment Office, my new allies in the fight for justice. Each government agency had different requirements for filing complaints. I researched forms, deadlines, and evidence standards. This wasn't just about getting revenge, it was about following the law and doing things right. My notebook filled with phone numbers, email addresses, and filing procedures. The Labor Board investigated wage theft. The Ethics Hotline handled corporate misconduct. The Unemployment Office would question why I was really fired. By closing time, I had a complete roadmap for taking Burton down through official channels. He had the corporate machine behind him, but I had the law on my side. I packed up my papers with satisfaction. Tomorrow, I would start making calls. Burton had taught me to be methodical and thorough. Now I would use those skills against him. The quiet co-working space buzzed with creative energy as freelancers and remote workers tapped away at laptops. I found an empty corner and opened my email, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I composed the most important message of my career. Mr. Burton, I typed, keeping my tone professional and neutral. Could you please confirm in writing whether weekend work hours are paid or unpaid? I want to make sure I understand company policy correctly for my records. I copied my labor attorney on the email as a blind recipient. Whatever Burton replied would be evidence in my case. If he admitted the work was unpaid, he was confessing to wage theft. If he lied and said it was paid, I had documentation proving otherwise. My finger hovered over the send button. Once this email went out, there would be no going back. Burton would know I was building a case against him, but I was tired of being afraid. I had done nothing wrong. I had simply refused to work for free, which was my legal right. I clicked send. The reply came back within an hour, short and damning. Weekend work is unpaid, as at discussed. This is standard practice for demonstrating company loyalty. My attorney would have a field day with that confession. Morning sunlight spilled across my kitchen table, illuminating stacks of organized evidence like a courtroom exhibit. I had spent the night creating multiple copies of everything: cloud storage, USB drives, and printed papers. Each set was labeled Exhibits A through H. Burton's confession email sat at the top of the pile. Weekend work is unpaid, as discussed. 7 words that would end his career and possibly land him in legal trouble. I divided the evidence into categories: wage theft documentation, retaliation proof, witness statements, and corporate conspiracy materials. Every document was dated, labeled, and cross-referenced. My phone buzzed with a message from my attorney. Received everything. This is the strongest wage theft case I've seen in years. We're ready to proceed. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 3 weeks ago, Burton had fired me for refusing to work for free. He thought he had won, but Burton had made a crucial mistake. He had assumed I was powerless just because I was quiet. He confused silence with weakness, humility with stupidity. Now he would learn the difference between a loyal employee and a doormat. The trap was set, and Burton was about to walk right into it. The attorney's office smelled like leather and justice. Citrus water sparkled in cut-glass pitchers as my lawyer, Ms. Martins, spread my evidence across her polished conference table. Her eyebrows lifted higher with each document she reviewed. "This is textbook retaliation," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "He documented his own illegal behavior better than we ever could." She flipped through Burton's Slack messages, his confession email, and the calendar screenshots. Her pen moved quickly as she took notes, building our legal strategy in real time. Wage theft, conspiracy, retaliation, and possibly fraud if we can prove he diverted the overtime budget, she continued. We're looking at federal labor violations and state employment law violations. My heart pounded with excitement and nerves. After weeks of feeling powerless, I finally had someone with the authority to hold Burton accountable. Miss Martins reached for her phone. "I'm calling the labor inspector," she said with a predatory smile. "They're going to want to see this evidence immediately." The call connected on the second ring. "Inspector Williams? I have a case that's going to interest you." Through the phone, I heard a woman's voice say, "I can be there in an hour." The cavalry was coming. The corporate boardroom felt like a courtroom. Cold air, sharp lighting, and the smell of fear masked as professional confidence. I sat at one end of the polished table while Burton glowered from the other side, flanked by HR Director Barnes and Corporate Legal Counsel Morrison. Labor Inspector Williams commanded the room with quiet authority. Her briefcase was open, displaying my evidence like an attorney's closing argument. Penny and Leonard sat nearby as my witnesses, both looking nervous but determined. My chipped coffee mug sat on the table in front of me like a battle standard. It was the only personal item I had salvaged from my corporate life, and now it would witness Burton's downfall. "Let's begin," Inspector Williams said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Burton shifted in his chair, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. He kept glancing at the evidence display, probably wondering how much trouble he was really in. Corporate Legal whispered something in Barnes's ear, but the inspector held up her hand for silence. "Mr. Burton," she said calmly, "we have some questions about your weekend work policies." The room went completely silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. It was showtime. The projector hummed as it displayed Burton's delete after calendar entries on the wall. The evidence looked even more damning, blown up to conference room size. Paper rustled as binders full of documents circulated around the table. Inspector Williams asked the question that made everyone freeze. "Show me your budget for overtime compensation." HR Director Barnes dialed corporate finance on speakerphone with shaking hands. The finance department's response echoed through the quiet room. "Q3 overtime reserve shows full funding." Budget was approved and allocated as requested. Burton's face went white. The overtime budget existed. The company had money set aside to pay employees for weekend work, but somehow that money had never reached the workers. "So where did the money go?" I asked, saying what everyone was thinking. The question hung in the air like smoke. Burton's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a fish drowning in air. Corporate Legal frantically typed notes on his laptop. Barnes stared at the speakerphone like it had betrayed her. Inspector Williams simply waited, letting the silence build pressure. The truth was becoming impossible to hide. The air turned colder as finance forwarded a detailed ledger to Inspector Williams' tablet. Numbers filled the screen. Transfers labeled contractor reconciliation that exactly matched our unpaid weekend dates. But the payments hadn't gone to employees. These approvals came from Burton's login credentials, the finance analyst's voice said through the speaker, tight with professional concern. The funds were redirected to a vendor account. Pens stopped moving around the table. Everyone stared at the screen, showing Burton's digital signature on fraudulent transfers. He hadn't just stolen wages, he had diverted company funds to a fake vendor tied to his personal accounts. Inspector Williams leaned forward with predatory interest. "This isn't just wage theft," she said slowly. "This looks like embezzlement." Burton's face had gone from white to gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the full scope of his crimes came to light. He had created a scheme to steal both from his employees and his employer. Corporate Legal was already on his phone, probably calling the fraud department. Barnes looked like she wanted to disappear under the conference table. The inspector closed her notebook with a sharp snap. "We'll be conducting a full audit," she announced, "and we'll be recommending criminal charges." Burton was finished. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Legal stood up with papers in hand. The table smelled faintly of new plastic from the security badge sleeves. Barnes was nervously arranging and rearranging. Effective immediately. All managerial authority is revoked pending investigation, she read with shaking palms. Employment terminated for cause, with forfeiture of all benefits and severance. Burton's company badge hit the polished wood with a dull clack that echoed through the silent room. Security officers had been waiting outside the door, and now they stepped forward to escort him out. Corporate is filing fraud charges and notifying federal regulators, outside counsel added, his voice clinical and cold. The FBI's white-collar crime division will be contacted within the hour. I watched Burton's face crumble as the reality hit him. He had gone from corporate manager to criminal suspect in the span of one meeting. His scheme to steal wages had unraveled into federal fraud charges. Inspector Williams gathered her evidence files with satisfaction. "Miss Cooper," she said to me, "will be in touch about restitution for all affected employees." Burton was led away in handcuffs, his corporate career over forever. The man who had demanded loyalty while stealing from his workers was finally facing justice. The system had worked, but only because I had fought back. Morning sun warmed the park bench where I sat with my chipped mug, steam curling up from fresh coffee. Birds argued in the trees overhead while I reviewed the final settlement documents. The folder in my lap contained everything: back pay, restored benefits, a written apology, and confirmation that the overtime fund was real and now protected. The company had implemented new policies requiring dual approvals for all budget transfers and quarterly audits of wage practices. Burton's fraud had cost him his freedom. He was serving 2 years for embezzlement and wage theft. My coworkers had received their stolen wages, plus damages. Penny could afford her children's school supplies. Leonard had taken his family on the vacation they deserved. The victory belonged to all of us. I sipped my coffee and watched people hurry to their jobs. Some of them probably faced the same exploitation I had encountered. Corporate bullies existed in every industry, stealing time and money from workers too scared to fight back. My phone had been buzzing with messages from other employees sharing similar stories. Word was spreading about how to document workplace abuse and fight back through legal channels. "If anyone asks you to work for free, start a folder," I said to the morning air, "and ask where the budget really went." The fight was won, but the war for worker rights continued.